Sometimes the most profound wisdom is hidden in the most unlikely places. It's not in some long sermon or a complicated law, but in a single sentence. In this case, it was an insult just hurled in anger that somehow became a blueprint for a better life. So today we're going to dive into one of those sentences, a verse from Matthew that holds a whole universe of ethical guidance on friendship, on joy, and really on what it means to live a good life.
So here's the verse, and you can feel the tension right away, can't you? It presents these two clashing ideas. First, you get this really sharp, specific accusation, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Wow. But then comes this quiet, confident reply, yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. What's so interesting is that it doesn't deny the charge at all. It just completely reframes it.
And that, right there, is the central paradox we're going to explore. Think about it. What was meant as pure slander, a way to completely discredit him by tying him to these social and religious outcasts, well, it became one of his most glorious titles. He never actually called himself this, but by letting the label stand, he basically owned it. He embraced it. He literally turned an attack into the very definition of his mission. So the big question for us is, how? And what in the world does that mean for us today?
Okay, so to really get our heads around this paradox, we have to see the verse as more than just one statement. It's kind of like it has two distinct layers. The first layer is the accusation, right on the surface. But if you peel that back, you find something else entirely. Beneath it lies this deep, radical invitation. An invitation to a completely different way of seeing God, our neighbors, and yeah, even ourselves.
So let's break that down. The accusation, it's a clear attempt to paint Jesus as undisciplined, right? Socially rebellious, someone who just breaks all the proper rules. But what's fascinating is that Jesus doesn't play defense. He doesn't argue back. Instead, he just reveals the invitation that was hiding inside their insult all along. He offers this brand new model, a model for friendship that, deliberately crosses all the boundaries, a model of joy that absolutely refuses to say that being pious means being miserable, and a model for community that's all about actively restoring the broken.
So here's the crucial takeaway. This one little verse really hands us two fundamental ethical duties that just flow right out of that invitation. The first one is an outward-facing responsibility, a duty to our neighbor. Let's call it radical friendship. And the second is more inward and communal, a duty to ourselves and our community. We'll call that restorative joy. So for the rest of our time together, we're just going to unpack these two big ideas.
All right, let's start with that first one, the duty of radical friendship. And I want to be clear, this is about so much more than just being nice to people. We're talking about a revolutionary kind of connection, a friendship that intentionally, deliberately, defies the social sorting systems that we all live with.
So to really feel just how radical this was, you got to understand who these people actually were. The Telonai, or tax collectors, they weren't just government employees. These were Jews working for the occupying Roman Empire. They would actually buy the right to collect taxes, and any amount they collected above the Roman quota was pure profit for them. The system itself basically encouraged extortion. So, yeah, they were seen as traitors to their own people, as collaborators with an oppressive regime. They were the ultimate insiders, but on the completely wrong side.
And then you have the term sinners, or hamartoloi. This was even broader. This wasn't just a label for someone who, broke one of the 10 commandments. It was a huge catch-all social category for pretty much anyone who lived outside the strict boundaries of the religious norms of the day. We're talking prostitutes, the ritually unclean, anyone who just didn't follow the meticulous purity codes. And to share a meal with them or even enter their home, well, that meant you became contaminated yourself. They were the ultimate outsiders.
And this brings us to what might be the most powerful word in the whole accusation, friend. In the original Greek, the word is philos. And this is so important. This isn't about being friendly or just a casual acquaintance. Philos implies a deep, affectionate, loyal commitment. It's the kind of word you'd use for a covenantal bond. So when Jesus accepts the title friend of sinners, he is making an absolutely shocking claim. He's declaring a covenant relationship with the very people his culture said were totally estranged from God. The scandal wasn't just that he talked to them. The real scandal was that he befriended them.
And this is where this ancient ethical challenge lands right in our laps, isn't it? Because every society, every single community has its own version of tax collectors and sinners. You know who I'm talking about. The people we label as politically toxic or morally compromised or just socially undesirable. The people we're subtly, or not so subtly, taught to keep at arm's length. This verse just forces us to ask, Who have we put outside the circle of our concern? And what would it actually look like to become their Phyllis, their committed friend?
So what's the defense for this totally scandalous behavior? Well, Jesus doesn't offer some complex theological argument. He simply points to the outcome. It's like saying the proof is in the pudding. The wisdom of an action is proven by its results. And the proof that this kind of radical friendship is true wisdom, it's found in what it produces, transformed lives.
And these deeds, they're crystal clear in the source material. You have Matthew, a tax collector who gets called away from his toll booth and becomes one of the 12 apostles. Then there's Zacchaeus, a chief tax collector known for being corrupt. He has one meal with Jesus and is so changed he pledges to pay back everyone he cheated 4 times over. And then there's the woman, known only by her reputation as a sinner. She enters a room uninvited, but not as an object of shame. She comes in as a devoted worshiper. This is the fruit of philos. It's redemptive friendship, not social shaming, that produces real, lasting change.
So that brings us to the second part of the accusation. Remember, it wasn't just who Jesus ate with, it was also how he ate and drank. And this points us to our second ethical duty, one that is, well, it's maybe even more countercultural today, the duty of restorative joy.
I love this paraphrase of the verse by J.B. Phillips. It just gets right to the heart of it. See, Jesus' critics had already dismissed John the Baptist, the ascetic, self-denying prophet, as being demon-possessed. So then Jesus comes along participating in feasts, going to weddings, really engaging with the world. And what do? They dismiss him as undisciplined, a glutton and a drunkard. His model for a holy life? It clearly included celebration, community, and actually enjoying creation.
And this is such a profound challenge to our modern culture of burnout, isn't it? A culture that praises busyness and practically treats exhaustion like a status symbol. We're all taught to manage our stress by ourselves and to think of rest as some kind of luxury we only get to have after we've pushed ourselves to the absolute brink. But Christ's model is the complete opposite. Rest isn't a reward, it's a requirement. And this is critical, it's not meant to be a solo activity, it's a communal practice about relying on other people to help share the burdens of life.
I mean, it's as simple as this. You were never intended to handle life stress alone. We are just wired for community. So much of our anxiety comes from this false belief that we have to manage everything by ourselves. And Jesus himself modeled the exact opposite. He chose his disciples, the text says, so they could be with him. That withness, that togetherness, was a primary purpose. It wasn't an afterthought.
And maybe the most powerful illustration of this comes from the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before his crucifixion. At the moment of his greatest anguish, what does Jesus do? He turns to his friends. He doesn't ask for advice. He doesn't ask for a solution. He just says, stay here and keep watch with me. He just needed their presence. And that's such a profound lesson for us, isn't it? Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is not our brilliant words, but just our quiet presence.
And it wasn't just something he modeled for himself. He commanded it for his followers. There's this point in Mark's gospel where the disciples are so busy with their work they can't even find time to eat. And his response is not to praise their hustle, it's to call a halt. He says, let's go. He's the one who initiates the retreat. He just understood that a sustainable life of service requires intentional, regular rhythms of rest and withdrawal. Okay, so we've explored these two really profound duties, the duty of radical friendship and the duty of restorative joy. Now, the final step is to bring all of this home, to make it personal. The next few slides have some questions for your own reflection. Let's just treat this as a quiet moment to journal, to think, and to figure out how to apply this wisdom to our own lives.
So, first question. Just think back to a specific moment, a time when you were completely overwhelmed. Who was it that showed up for you? What did they actually do? Maybe they didn't fix a thing. Maybe they just listened. Or maybe they just sat with you in the silence. Try to recall that feeling of a burden being shared. That right there, that's the principle of restorative community in action.
All right, now let's turn that same question outward. Who in your life right now is carrying a really heavy load? Who do you know who might just need that simple, profound gift of your presence? I'm not talking about your advice or your quick fix, but just that quiet assurance that says, hey, I am with you. You are not alone in this. Who's the person that comes to mind?
And finally, let's think about this one. For so many of us, I think our picture of deep spirituality can be one of solemn, kind of joyless duty. But what if that picture is incomplete? What changes for you in how you see your faith, your work,
even your free time, if you fully embrace a model of someone who came enjoying life? How might that give you permission to actually seek out and create joy for yourself?
You know, this whole thing started with an accusation about a meal, about who was sitting at the table and the spirit in which that meal was shared. So it just feels right that the application of this verse comes right back to a table. It all comes down to a choice that every single one of us has to make.
So here it is. This is the challenge that Matthew 11:19 leaves us with. It's not just a theological idea to be understood, it's an ethical practice that has to be lived out. So this week, who will you invite to your table? And that can be symbolic or literal, to practice that radical friendship. And what restorative joy will you intentionally make time to create both for yourself and for others? Because in the end, the verse is clear. It's the deeds, the friendships we forge, the burdens we share, the joy we create that prove the wisdom is true.